like we've got all our friends out here. These are
Yeah.
feels a little bit like user groups. And you know, we're learning something new each time as we come through this. Hi there, Charlie.
Wow,
Hello.
we've got a lot of
Welcome.
folks here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kathy's come back, and
Oh,
there's a relative there as well. We got
All
some.
right. I'm already outed.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
Charlie is my brother.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I know that name.
Oh, that's right. I've used so many Reese names in the in my Ponga pictures that you're already going to recognize that. Just goes to show it really is all in the family here. So we've got a few more people we're still expecting, but I'm kind of thrilled that we're all here right on time and early, in fact.
Yeah, I was going to say we're still a little bit early, and so we'll kind of do as we normally do here, and just kind of chat casually until we get to maybe 3 or 4 minutes after the hour, and then we'll start and dive in, and stragglers can join as they please.
Now, I sent out an email to all of you last night with a share, actually 2 emails then, a share on a picture that I thought it might be helpful to start with, and if you might not have already seen it, and then also just a little background with links that could be helpful. And it's my hope today that we can cover a number of these, you know, things to really get people going and productive, and frankly, things that we've learned from talking to so many customers and users. Welcome, Sherry. I guess you're working with the audio there. Well, it's lovely to see you. And Charlie, bonus points on Room Raider. Little inside joke going. And Anna, I also recognized you from the background you had at Roots Tech and your family. We have some wonderful stories to tell about your family. And Kathy, you've got Calgary Photo Solutions up front and center there.
My mom and grandma, and that's my uncle pointing a gun at me.
Pointing a gun at you.
Terrific.
That's brave. That's
It's
brave.
in his personality too.
And look at that, Tamara. You've got a whole like dissolve thing going. I'm impressed.
Yeah, and of course there's some of us here with like in bedrooms with closet doors showing.
We're gonna get you a green screen, buddy.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that.
You know what? We'll get you a green screen of my background, and then they'll never know where you are.
That's right.
Ooh, I see. Tamara's got a lighting situation going. Fancy. Oh, I see. Okay, I gotta up my game now.
Well, you can see which people have spent a lot of time on Zoom over the last year.
Yeah,
All
no
the
kidding.
accoutrements and all of the
Fancy toys.
Yep.
Yeah, I did our Zoom, all of those videos that we have that many of you have seen that we had at Roots Tech. I did all of those over the course of about 2 weeks in the end of December. And the light was terrible because, you know, I had to figure out what time of day I could do what, because this is, you know, I haven't got those fancy circular lights. Anyway, we all learn along the way. So why don't we get started in a couple of minutes? I thought it might be helpful. Hello, Shelley. Lovely to see you.
So let's do this just by way of introduction. So we've got as everybody has obviously gathered, we've got a lot of old friends here, and we've got some new friends, and hopefully some excited prospects to move forward here. Everybody understands how Zoom works, I think, based on the conversations we just had. So you can do one of 2 things if you like. You can throw questions out or comments or communicate with other members of this through the chat function at the bottom. All of you know where I think the chat capability is at the bottom of the screen. Feel free. You can send a combination of either a private chat or a chat to everybody, or you can talk to Barb and I directly if there's something you specifically want to ask as a question for us to follow up. We typically try and make these as interactive as possible. So we intentionally keep them at small audiences, 10 or 12 people or less, so that we can have a lot of interaction among the attendees for questions and comments. And typically we like to talk about a combination of elements. So today, I think what we'll do is we'll run everybody through a little bit of a look at the product in terms of, I think everybody at this point in time understands that we're essentially a digital storytelling service with 3 domains of functionality that are around organizing your photographs and creating a certain capability around facial recognition and the organization of those photos by faces. The idea of curating and storytelling around adding anecdotes and artifacts and any kind of history and capabilities around describing the layered stories that exist in the photograph, and then sharing and collaborating with others. So we'll touch on each one of those areas of functionality. And then I think what we'd also like to do, and Barb will talk about this not only as she runs through the product, but we would also like those of you that either have ideas about how the product would be used or who are currently using the product to talk a little bit about use cases and maybe provide some general insights that you've had to the group about things that you've come across that are either new features that you like or areas where you might have gotten stuck and you just want to put up your hand and say, hey, listen, I got trapped in this little hole here and I need to understand how to better use it. So any general insights like that would be very interesting because we have a really broad cross section of use cases here. And so one of the areas that we've gotten a lot of questions on recently that Barb's going to specifically highlight is how to include different types of media in the storytelling elements, whether that be, something that's a little bit static in nature, like maybe a scan, or something that might be a little bit more interactive, or like full motion video and links to other websites and things like that. Okay. So before we get started, we're going to try and run for an hour. We have not yet, I think this is our 5th one of these, and we have never been able to keep it to an hour. We keep it open, so if you guys want to talk longer than that, then feel free to stay, and we'll be happy to chat with you longer than the allotted time. But as we get started here, does anybody want to kick us off with any questions or experiences or things that they want us to specifically touch on? Okay, so Barb, I'm going to hand it over to you and we'll run through a quick overview.
Sure. And thank you again, all of you, for coming. It's such a thrill now to look back at so many of you that are familiar faces as we go forward. And as you know, or most of you will know, I sent out last night an email to all of you as participants that included links to an example picture that I had not invited most of you to yet, but it is kind of a new favorite because it maps to an article that I put together after listening to the questions that people had, which relates to what are the different kinds of media you can attach to a Ponga picture, you can include with a Ponga picture. So in this case, since it's a demonstration, quite frankly, it's not my best storytelling example, and I look forward to all of you having great storytelling examples to talk about. But this one is kind of an example, and since my brother here has already been outed, um, this is our family, the Harger family, which was our great-grandfather. And our grandfather was actually a remarkable photographer. I'd like to think of him as a nerd, and my grandmother was an extraordinary family historian, collecting family history into a book. So that combination really makes for a wonderful array of pictures that if you followed us on social media, on Facebook and Instagram and so on, you'll start to recognize some of the characters in many of these stories. That idea of characters in stories, we've realized to be very important as you're looking at these old family pictures, because of course, I'm just actually trying to clean up my own desktop so I can see where I'm going. Bear with me here. So as we move around in these pictures, we start with who the characters are. And as you know, once you have a collection of who the characters are in a picture, the stories start to emerge. This particular picture, and I'm going to enlarge my screen. I believe that affects all of you as well. This particular picture, you should be able to see it in your Zoom screen, is a favorite of mine. I call it the Harger family picnic. And this guy here is my, here we go, my great-grandfather. And he is kind of a big man in the family. In fact, my own brother, Charlie, is named for him. He was a big deal in a small town in western Kansas called Abilene, Kansas, which is famous for having been at the end of the Chisholm Trail. Now, what makes all of that relevant to me is I didn't really grow up with any of that kind of experience. Diving into these pictures has been a way for me to relive those stories. In this particular one, I've gone through all sorts of little details that I've noticed over time about the picture and started to add that kind of content into the picture. Now, as you have probably already realized, with any Ponga picture, you can turn on and off the selections, show and hide the selections in the little toolbar over here, as well as using this for zooming in and out of the picture so it can be very quickly zoom in to an appropriate view level for where you are. Because I've already gone through the upload process that a member can do to upload their own pictures, and the gallery that lets me sort through all of the faces that have appeared in a picture to skip or name. Oh, isn't that one convenient? This one's Charlie. Oops. Oh, I just gave you the wrong name. We'll use that as an example. And by the way, I have slightly fake names in this version. And you know what? I do that intentionally. The slightly fake names are really important because I'm using these as demos, and I know they're going out all over the place. And I'm just to the core of our business. Live people, I'm not going to mess with their identity, so that's why I do that. So don't go trying to look up people that aren't there. But on the other hand, as we study ancestry, another kind of content that a lot of people want to be able to integrate into the stories, into their pictures, is who are these people? So this is my grandmother, whom I mentioned is important insofar as having collected a lot of important to this story insofar as having collected a lot of family history. So a lot of people ask us about, wait, how can I include a link to Family Search? And the answer is you include a link to Family Search and you go through your login and you get to that account. It is either a paywall or any kind of password protection. You can include that link, but notice something here. I've included that link without the HTTPS. And that's another important clue. When you're adding content into Ponga Pictures, if you want that content to preview, include the link with the HTTPS. If you don't want it to preview, don't include it. And with external content that is password protected, all you would see is a paywall. So there's nothing very interesting there. I'd go strip out the HTTPS. And if you're stripping out the HTTPS while you're typing it here, you'll get in a sort of an attempted embed box. You kind of don't want that, I would think. So you can do that in some other editor and then paste it in without the HTTPS. I'm going over a bunch of stuff very quickly here, and I can see chats coming up. I'll come back to those, and I know Cameron's been watching those. So I just want to give a very quick overview of why I've shared this and what kind of content you've seen in here, rather than pedantically go through each one. Because quite frankly, you've got now a lot of ways to do that. So each of the different types of content here shows an example. For those of you who've been playing with us for a while, we actually added a few features since RootsTech a couple of months ago. This is one of them. What this is I have added a selection, added a picture, a drag and drop in a picture to this selection. And the picture will now preview when you mouse over it. That didn't used to be true. And when you, of course, open the sidebar, each of these still appears like this in a light box. This is a particular favorite for me. This is actually, after all this time looking at these pictures, I realized that that is my grandmother, but this, I noticed this cameo she's wearing. I think that's this cameo, which is in my possession, my mother gave me. And it's just a real treat to see that kind of provenance for an artifact in the family. And I know all of you have some of those kinds of stories with the pieces that you carry. You can also use it in reverse by taking pictures of artifacts that you have and retelling the stories that you know as a means to pass those stories on in your own family. Now, I said this picture is important because I've used it for all of this kind of content. And the way that you get to that article that I wrote about that is right here, where there is a link to this separate article all about this particular picture. So what I did was go one at a time through the different kinds of content in this particular picture so that you can find it and you can see how I did it. This is a little general kind of how it's done. There's more detailed how it's done in the help settings. And as I think you already know, you can get to the help settings either from the little question mark up here, or you can actually directly search for articles right here. If I want to say video, for example, it pops up a number of articles about, what to do with video, and you can always do that. You can always make that go away by dropping the down button. So that was a very quick walkthrough of the many kinds of content that you can add into a picture. Content itself does not make a story. On the other hand, these are the sort of practical matters as a tool of how we use this. Some of the kinds of things that we've been delighted to discover as we've had the product in the market now for a few months has been people coming back to us and saying, oh, wait, I have a photo book that has storyboards in it, or layouts and assemblies in them. I want to create a Ponga picture of that. Can I do that? Why, of course you can. And then attach additional content to the far side of that, which is what one of our users in Australia has done. And you may have seen her featured in some of our social media. And those are the kinds of questions that are coming up. And I can talk later about using this to create not just a single page from that kind of content, but really use it to reproduce an album, and then how to use that and share the album successfully. So that's a series of explanations that I'm looking forward to putting together. Pam, lovely to see you again. You were in our session last month, and in fact, I was just describing creating albums from Ponga pictures, and that was somewhat inspired by a question that you were asking, I believe, a project for the Civil War. Yeah, amazing collection. So I'm going to stop right there. I've shared this picture with all of you. I've shared the link to the blog post with all of you. It shows these 12 kinds of content, and guess what? There's actually more than 12. 12 is just a convenient number, but I think it gives you enough of an example to get you started. Are there questions just from that? And I haven't seen the chat. Are there questions just from that?
Did anybody try to add some interesting multimedia efforts and activities to their photos and run into any problems? Are there things that you'd like to try, or have thoughts that you'd like to try that we can kind of walk you through?
A lot of mute. That's okay.
Everybody's on mute.
That's okay. Let me, if I think for many of you have been using the product for a while, and by the way, if this is a little new to you and we go a little areas that are confusing you, I'm always happy to do a little tour or a conversation offline as well, one-on-one. I wanted to come back to that this other conversation about using pictures with other pictures, and into something of a assemblies. Here, let me see. Trying to think of some in my own examples. Even I noticed the things that are posted into Facebook tend to have a lot of the sort of almost cliches from within Facebook of, a hand holding a picture. Oh, there's a good one. This is an example of it's included in everybody's accounts. And we decided that it would be really helpful to have one single sort of common baseline to see different kinds of content that even if you are a guest and not a member, you could go and play with as if you are in control of it. Well, you are in control. It's your example picture. And this, of course, is an assembly, essentially. There is one bug. There, it's working. recording again. Interesting. So, oh yeah, this is a slight variation on what's in there. In your account, the one in your accounts may be a slight break because of some changes made on the Instagram side, but this was linking out to a picture that had been shared on Instagram, and then earlier a recording that had been done a while ago. Um, uh, I'm going to guess that it might be helpful right about now to take a moment and talk a little bit about some of the ways you are using Ponga or considering using Ponga. And is there anybody I should pick on, or did you want to volunteer?
Hey Barb, could I
Sure.
sorry just ask for a question or actually
Yes.
a comment? I am just starting, as
Yeah.
you know. Barb and I have had conversations and texts, but I loved how easy it was to upload my pictures. So I appreciate, you know, how fast it went too, but I still need to do more playing with this, because I am most interested in this particular project that I'm working on in doing more of a almost like a slideshow, because I do remember from some of the things that I wrote down, maybe from your Roots Tech presentation, that Ponga could be a great way to not only save type of slideshow type of things, but also then obviously to share it with family, which you and I had talked about was the biggest kind of challenge on some of these other sites. So I really love to. I didn't get the link to the Australian presentation. So if you could post that in the chat, that would be great.
Sure.
That might help me too. And I'm just trying to figure out
Actually,
how to do this.
sure, no problem. If you go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Ponga Pictures, or youtube.com/Ponga. On YouTube, it's in the testimonial section, and in Facebook, I believe it's the pinned video right now, is Victoria Press, which is at victoriaspress.com. And she is an Australian blogger who's been doing a lot of family history and now just moving into storytelling. And she's doing a lot of that storytelling in her blog. And this is where she's gone really excited about storybooks, which is interesting. That the term I thought storyboards. I thought the term storyboards was really interesting because I thought of storyboards in like a cascade for an ad or something. You know, this is how the ad is going to run. These are the storyboards. But no, and I don't know whether this is from her Canadian experience or she's a Canadian living in Australia, a language thing, but she thinks of that as felt boards, as a way a felt board tells a story. And you know, it's funny when you think about it that way. Is it a slide? Is it a scrapbook? Is it an album? The assembly of pictures together tell a story all by themselves. Then you can get in and tell a story in even more ways. And we're creating a tool to make it easy to do those layers. So as you mentioned slides, we can think of slides a couple of different ways. One is this way, as vignettes, you know, assemblies, whatever you want to call them. Or we could think of slides as, did you want to bring in external content as a slide, a slideshow?
Yeah, for me, it is more of a collection of pictures that I have actually written. I had already written a kind of a, you know, just a typed up an explanation of all these pictures and as like a tour of actually a tour of a historical family history type of significant place that we visited. So yes, I wanted to be able to storyboard it, I guess,
see.
and share it with family. And I just thought,
Perfect.
and it'd be wonderful. I love that, you know, I could embed, you know, a map of where we went and maybe the website of the, I found a website of the actual park that we went with maybe clearer pictures than the pictures that I took, so that I could share this experience with other family members.
Right. So one of the most important things, and this is actually what I'm going to do in a new article that's even more specific to it, is where you can take a picture and link to another picture. So This one, I didn't put it in this particular example because I didn't want to create the complexity of sharing multiple pictures. The way I would do this, and this will be written up in another article, but you can embed a link to another picture in any picture. So I'm going to open my album here. Notice I did that in a separate tab. And here is this other picture. So I'm going to take this link here. I'm not going to paste it in here because if I did, I'd notify all of you that I just did that and trigger all these notifications. But for example purposes, I would paste that again without the HTTPS, but with the www. See, it's trying to embed it. Take that out. And I paste the link here. And now this link would appear and I would drag in the image from the external site right in here. Trying to think of, oh, I did do it in this picture. There we go. So I did exactly that here. So here is so this is the story of this little girl in, take those off. So this little girl, my Aunt Dorothy, in this park. It has to be about 1918 because I know how old the baby was, my Aunt Betty. And here they are in this park in Abilene, Kansas. And I found this other picture of her, which I happen to have opened in another tab right here, but I could have pasted the link in there. So that almost looks like the same day. By the way, I looked more closely at her dress and I realized, yeah, no, it's not the same day. It's a similar dress, but not the same, you know, because times are different. And so there's the dress and there she is in this other picture. So where is she? Oh, look at that building. As I look really closely at that building, I can see it looks a lot like this building here in this picture. So it clicks the link and it goes to the other picture. And this one is this picture of my great-grandfather's house. Now I have the address for that house. So here's that address in Google Straight, sorry. I have to work my way around the, there we go. Google Street View right now. So I'm looking back at that house. I've never been there actually. I'd like to go there someday. And I can see the whole neighborhood as it is right now, which is kind of cool. You get this feeling that you're there. And all I did was nest one picture inside of another. This is an area that we've thought about in terms of, frankly, future product development that would make that a little snazzier and easier, but we didn't know if people cared. It looks like people care. So that's the kind of thing. You can even start, if you wanted, with a, you know, a grid of, you know, you have maybe 6 panels by, you know, 6 by 4, total of 24 panels. In the case of Victoria's Press, she's taking a photo book that she had printed in large format, which was lovely, but very expensive. And now she has each of her cousins saying, oh, would you send me one of those? Yeah, it's $125 to print. It gets, you know, print and ship and everything. So finding ways to be able to turn it into something digital. The other trick, so before I go further than that, let's review again. I have, I can create layers of pictures that link to other pictures, right? And what I'm recommending to, so does everybody understand that? Simple idea, right?
Not really.
That's okay. This is why it can get confusing, and this is why I'm going to write it up into more detail with more illustrations to make it clear. But quite simply, in the same way that I can provide links to other content, I can provide links to Ponga content, and therefore nest one picture inside of another. And once I'm doing that, then I could arrange all of the pages of the book as one layer and then go into another layer for the page and another layer for pictures that are inside that page. That's the high level concept. And I know it can get really confusing because you know what? We haven't we're just figuring out what the right metaphors are, what the logical ways of talking about this stuff are. And so we still need some basic metaphors to really be comfortable with it. And so it deserves another article in a way that more helpfully explains what content is, in the same way that this picture has just a smattering of different kinds of content. Here is another of these street views, so that you can you can see how you move around within Street View. In the article, I explain exactly where to go in Google Maps and then Google Street View to be able to paste in a link to Street View. It's not, frankly, obvious within Google, but once you know where to go get it, it's consistent every time.
So I've concluded in the chat for everybody a link to our tips and tricks location, where we publish a lot of these kind of how-to elements and little hacks and instructions, and try and answer these type of questions. So this location will include these articles about the ways to manipulate some of this media going forward.
Right.
So you'll just be, just click that link at the bottom and bookmark that, and you can hang on to that, and that will help you as a resource.
Also, that link is always in this bottom right here of the Ponga library. Check out the tips and tricks is right there too. Yeah.
I have a question. When I set up my account, first thing I did was upload hundreds of pictures. And the creation of these storyboards or albums or things is difficult by the fact that they're the hundreds of pictures. I mean, I wondered whether maybe the more sensible strategy would be to have in mind a story you want to tell, and then bring the pictures in behind them, or can you do that in a segment or something like that?
You can. That's a great question. When you go through the naming business, it creates these albums for you by people, right? But you can also create your own. So I created one, for example, for Abilene, Kansas. You just go create a new album, give it a title, and then drag pictures in there. Also, this is another feature that we added since we first released, is if you have a whole album full of pictures, you might recognize that one, as a matter of fact. If you have a whole album full of pictures, when you drag them in, it will automatically create a date time stamped album for you. And that means it's actually somewhat to address the problem that you were looking at when you brought in hundreds of pictures, is if you had pictures already in an album, in a folder on your desktop that were related to a given topic, or a time, right, like a trip or a location, you can just drag them all over at once, and we will create an album for you. You just rename the album. To rename an album, click in so you move your mouse over the title, click in the title. I usually do a select all, which is a key command, Command A, or a click on one end and drag across, and then say pictures, in this case, pictures used in Instagram posts, or maybe make that shorter and just say Instagram.
Thanks. That's a great help, because I only loaded these pictures for this specific project. So thank you for pointing that out, how I can make it one album, because I was wondering how I could get them all into one album easy. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Charles asked actually a very good question, because we've tried to architect the system for a little bit of flexibility on the front end, because a lot of the people that we talk to are more photo driven, and they put the photos in, and then they look at the photos, and then the photos have a tendency to act as kind of metaphors or mnemonics for the story, and it kind of pulls the story out of you, because now all of a sudden you have a visual reference. There's other people that come at this with the story in mind first. And so if you come at this with the story in mind first, then you can architect this around the folder naming process, and then create folders around what that story is, whether it's an event, whether it's an individual, or some other point in time, or for some other purpose. And then you can organize your photos into those folders and use that to drive your story mechanism, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Because I know I have photos that I want to do that specifically for. But
Right.
I thought it would just be easier to start and to get to know this program if I came with a project, a small project that I
Yeah.
knew ahead of time what I wanted to do with it. So
Yeah. No, that's very good. And you know, it's helpful to keep in mind. I mean, one of the fundamental sort of conceptual uh, differences between this and how you think of pictures otherwise. You know, you think of pictures in terms of physical prints, and now we're taking a physical print and making it a link, a pointer. So one physical picture can be in multiple albums at the same time because it's not a picture, it's a link. And once you understand that, which is, you know, really kind of how the web works, and we've been using that now for 20 years, so it's not as strange as it might have seemed 20 years ago. So you can take all those pictures, drag them in by Abilene, Kansas, and then you have your album Abilene, Kansas, but we're going in the background and saying, who are all these people in here? And then you go through the whole uh, gallery process to name them, and all those people are sorted into named albums, and you have both. They're sorted into named albums, and you have them by by that topical
The other
that
thing that
topical
probably
album.
might be a useful way of thinking about this as well is that, a lot of us have tremendous numbers of photographs, and Shelley, it sounds like you might have that as well. And you think of this maybe in a series of projects or a big project. One of the things that we're trying to create kind of a little bit of as a discipline is this idea of don't try and eat the elephant in one bite. This should be a series of incremental efforts, and go ahead and load up any number of photos. We have people that have thousands and thousands of photos in the system. We have other people that are, I would consider, almost expert users that may have 50, and they've decided that, we've recently engaged with a professional photo organizer, and one of the things that he suggested is this idea that you can't really have an intimate relationship with hundreds and thousands of photographs. And so pick one or two of them out of your library and start with that. Understand how to use the system, really work at adding, Barbara is a perfect example here with her Harger family picnic photo, right? She's really spent a lot of time with that one photo. She's curated a tremendous amount of content in there, lots of different media types. And that one photo now tells a tremendous story about the elements of the objects in the photo and the histories of the people that are represented there. So, if you do something like this and you spend, 30 minutes or an hour every couple of days or once a week or whatever, I think it's easier to step through those projects rather than looking at it as, oh my God, I've got this one big pile of photos and I'm not really sure what to do with it.
Another thought, and you know, you somewhat inspired this, Cameron, is the idea of the sunset cruise. To sort of, you know, I find it partly is the nature of what we do, but I'm spending a lot of time with my collections of my own pictures, doing all kinds of things for Ponga. But then every now and then I can finally sit back, relax at the end of the day, and go in and really look, just deeply look. And it's really relaxing and fun to just sort of go through, and all of a sudden you discover things you've never noticed. I mean, I mentioned this picture and the brooch she's wearing, but I also staring at this picture for a long time, trying to figure out things like what are the toys the kids are holding, or wait a minute, who's the photographer? And you know, a lot of times in what we do, and I think, you know, people like you, Kathy, as a professional organizer, um, you realize that it's never was about the picture. It's about what's not in the picture. It's about what's invisible in the picture. And those of us who are really spending time with them can start to look back. And even as parents, looking at this picture I have right here of, you can't really see it very closely, but it's my husband and my daughter when my eldest was like a year old. And you know, it's just a little snapshot of a kid and a parent. But you know, what you start to see in it is what that child became as an adult and the things that interested her as an adult. And then you start telling that part of the invisible story, and it just sends tingles down your spine. You know, that's what this is about. And then finding ways to either use your social connections to, or rather reaching out to your social connections to strengthen them through those stories themselves. And how you tell those stories. As my brother Charlie knows, you know, we didn't spend a lot of time in the mainland US growing up. And I didn't know any of my, I was the youngest, I didn't know any of my cousins. And learning about who these people were, and those who did grow up and did spend time in the, you know, with our great grandfather, and those that period of historic time in the American West is, you know, it's a personal bond with history that I had no idea of. Pam, I don't want to call on you again, but uh, uh, last month you just blew me away with your story about the Civil War and this amazing album that you have in your collection. And I wonder if I could ask you to tell a little bit about what you're doing with that.
Sure. So far, I am getting overwhelmed with it. Which is kind of why Cameron's observation, or your observation about taking them in chunks, makes a whole lot more sense. Because I have all these photos that came to me through my grandfather's line of the family. It's a phenomenal photo album of soldiers that my fourth great grandfather served with in the Civil War. And it's apparently a thing that they did in the Civil War, where if you served, when you went to certain towns, you had photos of yourself taken, and they were printed kind of like a baseball card. I need to figure out exactly what it's called. Shelley's like, yeah, I've heard of such things. So I have these collection of photos that my great grandfather put into an album. He knew who everyone in the photos were because he served with them. Some of them have names under them, some of them don't. None of them are of my soldier because they were photo albums of people that he collected. They're not him. There's not one of him. However, there's one of Lincoln, there's one of Grant, there's one of all of the higher ups in his group. And now I have this album. And so diligently, I scanned all of these photos. I have maybe, it's not a lot, it's maybe 35 photos. And then I saw Ponga and I thought, oh, perfect. I did all this, I did that, and then that's it. It just, I could not, I had too much. I could not get a focus. I could not get, like, now what kind of moment. And that's kind of why I've been sitting in on these classes, trying to get the next step.
Right.
How do I do something with this in Ponga? And then more appropriately, how can I share it? Again, my guy is not in there.
Right.
Henry Welty of the 68th Ohio is not in there. However, George Wells of the 68th Ohio is. His family might want a picture of him.
Right.
So I need to make this in a way that I can share it. And I'm definitely, this is my head, and this is, I'm swimming. So
sometimes the easiest way to begin on a project like that, you've inhaled the pictures essentially into Ponga, and so you've got a gallery that's just chock full of faces you don't know, I'm guessing, right? And that can be intimidating. I would say that's okay. No harm. Just go straight to the library. Don't let that worry you. In fact, I keep that little blue ball going here in my gallery, so that actually right now I do that in this demo account so that I can always get back into the gallery, because as soon as you get to 0 is like inbox 0, and it won't be there for you. It appears each time you open it up again. Hi, Reed. Welcome back. Welcome to the show. And so in your case, it seems to me that the sharing part may want to come sooner rather than later, because there's going to be people that you want help in identifying, and there are going to be Civil War buff, Civil War historians that might have content to share with you to contribute to that. There is a very important piece of the artifact in terms of the physical arrangement in the album and the physical pictures in the album that may have significance that you don't know about, that could be very interesting. And this is a great case where taking a scan of the entire page would be very helpful, and then linking to those separate pictures could be helpful. But keep in mind that though only the owner has access to the gallery, to the actual the gallery, which will apply labels to every instance of a face, you can share a picture with people who are, you know, your guests and don't have access to that gallery, but they can make selections on a face and they can make comments, because a selection is just a selection. And you as the owner, you know, you can ask a question in there, they can give you an answer, then you can go into the gallery and make the, you know, make the change or add a name or whatever other kinds of things you can do. You can do that by asking questions when you share them. I might, in your album case, to Cameron's eating of elephants or whatever, um, you know, you could do one album page at a time, and, you know, just share the album page, not even the detailed links, but share the whole album page. And
sorry to interrupt, but this is where my anal controlling person, I want to have it perfect before I share it. And I need to hear what you're saying and to throw it out there, because I can't make it perfect.
I know.
Other people can make it perfect. And
you know,
I need
our
to,
favorite saying in this business is done is better than perfect. Particularly when you're dealing with really old stuff, and if you need permission, I'm sure all of us give you permission, Pam, to not have to be perfect. And my other suggestion was to, if with what we do when we start out, is we start out with what we know, and we don't spend a ton of time on, and I'm talking right now sorting, well, anything digital, physical. We don't spend a ton of time, if we look at something, go, no idea what that is, it goes in a pile, because I'm not going to know any better when I have to deal with it. I'm going to have to do a ton of work, instead of stopping at that point to try and figure out, who is this, where does it belong? And we start with what we know and use that as a base. And then quite often you'll find, oh, that over there in my unknown pile, this goes with it, and now I know what it is.
Yeah, that's good advice. Kat,
great advice.
For everybody here, Kathy's a professional organizer, and understands this process and does this as a living. So that's really good practical advice that I'm sure that she has earned and has been hard won over a lot of years of trying to figure out the complexity around this. So.
Absolutely. And one of the things to keep in mind, I know, I have a feeling that Ponga encourages and attracts a lot of people who have this kind of detailed knowledge and a drive to go find it all. And it's important to keep in mind that Ponga can also be a tool in progress. So you can even have in mind doing the perfect one later. This first one can be a draft. It can also be a multiple versions of it, depending on who you want to be sharing it with. Also, as the owner of the picture, you can delete any comment you want at any time. And it might be useful to make a selection to be asking questions and soliciting answers, and then to go through and delete that whole section and then create a new one that goes in and adds more content.
Yeah.
So don't let the white page scare you. Don't let the pictures scare you, that you can keep going forward. In fact, that was something that Victoria was talking about in producing her photo book. As soon as she was published on the photo book, she found all these mistakes, and it killed her. And going to Ponga was a realization that she could change this stuff and update and edit it.
Yeah, I think
Sorry.
no, that's a great comment. I think that everybody gets intimidated by the blank canvas because initiating the process is so much more difficult than editing yourself once you get something up there. So, to Kathy's point, don't let the good be compromised by the perfect. And so get something up there. And as we're all kind of getting used to, sometimes just authenticity has its own value. So your reactions and your thoughts and your anecdotes don't have to be perfectly editable. They don't look like they have to be written by the Wall Street Journal. Just, get things up there. And once they're up there, then if you want to edit them, change them, or whatever, I think that that's the way to think about proceeding.
You talked about comments. How are you notified if somebody makes a comment?
Great question. In fact, as soon as you, when you share a picture with someone, they get an email notifying them that they've been invited to this picture. They respond, and then they add a comment, a reply, for example, to something that you've asked. You get a notification. Now, we don't put the content of the comment into the email itself. It tells you that they've made a comment into that picture, and then you go into the picture itself. So I've had some people that I've been have shared pictures with me and are constantly working on them. I'm getting a whole lot of little notifications. So you will watch for email notifications. Another thing is that as soon as anyone changes anything in any of your pictures, they will rearrange themselves into the upper left-hand corner of your library. So in the time we've been talking, I've opened a few pictures, and they have rearranged themselves into my my library view as opposed to individual album views. You may have noticed while we were talking about stories told in a picture, I looked at this one, which is always one of my favorite family pictures, because there's such a curiosity. What's this cap, and why is it on the floor, and who is this guy? What was that all about? So while we were chatting, I added something to the headline. I was trying to demonstrate how a headline is in, and you notice that it rearranged itself to the upper left-hand corner of the library. And so those are the ways in which you get notifications.
Yeah, it's always good too, because you always know where the most recent actioned photo is.
Right. I wanted to come back to the point about using Ponga as a means to kind of collect feedback, collect content, and even make notes about your research. It's using the principles of researchers to rather, a good practice is to use the principles of researchers in terms of documenting where your content came from, why you had that idea, and notice that every comment also gets a date timestamp. So for example, if I were to make a selection on this cap, and add comments here like, I always wondered about this cap. Kind of but it will also always have that little date timestamp. So I am, by the way, Audie in this example. And then if somebody else comes along and adds something else that they knew, and now we have a trail going, then it shows when the comments were made that are useful.
Pam has I was gonna say, Pam has a question about
Yeah.
a square on a photo that's distracting, and can she get it removed? And I'm not sure if that was on this photo, Pam, or a prior one.
Good question. Always a good question. There's two ways. One is that the show hide will show and hide the selections. I personally have always called them the ugly black boxes. Always looking at ways to both make them findable, but also so that they aren't distracting from your view. The other thing is that, and I do have to say that deleting always seems to be the thing that is hard to do in Ponga. It's not obvious how to delete things, but I do like to explain to people how to delete a selection, because it's really not obvious. This is what I call the invisible button. It's always in the upper left-hand corner of the sidebar is how you would delete a selection, if you've ever wondered about how to do that. And we always make sure that you're sure about that.
Pam,
And
did
there
that get
is
it for you?
also a useful article titled How to Delete Almost Anything, which you can find by looking in the library under the word oops, how to delete almost anything.
Pam, did that get the question answered for you?
Yeah. And again, as a member, you can delete your own comments and those of any guest. Your guests can delete their own comments, but they can't delete anyone else's. You know, basic principles.
So I have a bunch of stories and life stories to put together. Is there a limit in how much I can actually put into this with a photograph?
That's a great question. In essence, we haven't found it yet. You can
Okay.
you can put any number of selections. I have one picture. I actually I was bored while testing, and you know that Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album cover. I'm going to guess our audience here is old enough to remember that. There is a pictures of all of the people that were inspiring to the Beatles on that album cover. So I sat down diligently and made selections around every single face and looked them all up and figure out who they all were. And pada, it was like 118 selections on a picture. So, you know, the picture, there's no degradation actually in speed in terms of it opening or anything else. And as far as how much content you can put in an individual selection, it's more limited by what's practical to display than anything else. If you have to scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll through content, that might be enough, you know, more than is really practical. But to Ponga, as far as pictures are concerned, remember, one of the really important things about what we're doing is we're not modifying the core photograph by stuffing content into it. The way Ponga works is that when you're making a selection and putting contextual information, sharing information with it, that information is actually stored external to the image itself, and it's all preserved in the original formats. So from a practical perspective, it also means that you aren't hauling around more and more content with the image, so it doesn't degrade, it doesn't, you know, there's no real problem with that. Make sense?
Yeah.
I wonder if Anna, I know we spoke at Roots Tech, and again, I don't mean to call you out. You've been very quiet. I saw those big grins when Kathy was talking about, you know, the perspective of a professional photo organizer and trying to get stuff done. As I recall, you're quite the professional genealogist, and you were telling stories about the extended families you've pulled together from across Northern Europe. Are there some of ways in which you see Ponga being used for those kinds of use cases?
Yeah, so for me, the main reason for using Ponga is to be able to share the pictures and be able to let other researchers and other family members give me information that I'm missing,
Yeah.
and so that we can help each other.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the idea. However, I do have a vast amount of photos, and as I wrote in the chat, I never upload more than absolutely maximum 20 photos at a time. And then I add all the information that I need to keep track of what I have uploaded.
I see.
I work with one little branch or folder
Right.
at a time, because if I would upload, say, 2,000 or 3,000 photos straight off, I would be lost.
Yeah, yeah. You know, you bring up an interesting point that I think is, again, not really obvious to people from a use case perspective. Oftentimes, we have our pictures are already stored in some structure, some logical means. And if you upload a picture that has already has a name that has been the file name when it was carried over. It's important to realize that what Ponga will do is take the words that were in the file name and bring them in and make that the title as the file name. So in this case, the file name was not RIP, it was RIP, which are the elder gentleman's initials. But it's a really consistent, basically we just turn it into a sentence case. If you want to can maintain that reference back to where your original files are stored, you're very welcome to put any of that kind of stuff into this description here. You might even include links to where your master files are kept, or any kind of reference order. You can capture this original file name and pop it over there, or do anything else that you might like. That can be a very useful way to keep that structure there. Another point is that if you import, say, 20 pictures, or upload, say, 20 pictures into Ponga, go through and name those 20 people. When you upload another 20 pictures that also include people you've already named, we will go ahead and name those people for you, because we can tell. We can, we've seen this face before. So for a given person, we didn't know this, but when you grow up, you basically are like 8 different people as far as your face is concerned, right? This face here is our mom, and here she was as a young woman, and here she was as a child. Well, I know it's the same person. So now the next time I upload another picture of her as a child, I've already named her. It'll come up with that name. This is what we call the reference portrait. But that kind of, once you've named those 7 or 8 different faces that are associated with that person over different ages, it's much easier. And that is an advantage to uploading in not too big a batch at a time. It's not only practical for those reasons, but it also means that you don't have to keep looking at every single instance of the face that's different from other instances that are, you've just seen, if that's helpful. I think, yeah.
That's basically what I do, because I also check that it actually connects the right name to the right picture, because there are people within the family tree that, so for example, me as a young girl and my aunt as a young girl could be the same person.
Right.
So I need to make sure that it gets the right connection when I upload it.
Right.
That reason.
In fact, I wanted to show something that's not that obvious. When I was going through the gallery example, I called out my brother and I accidentally gave him my great-grandfather's name for whom he was named. So Charles Moreau Harger. And I just remembered that example as you were describing that. And I knew to find it by going into my great-grandfather's album, right? So that was certainly not the 19th century. He was not a little boy in the 50s. And so there he is with his box of Special K. And so that is not the right person. So the way I fix this, and this is in the documentation, and many of you may have already been through this. I know it's a little bit confusing, so I'm going to go through it again. Whenever you click on the name of a person, it shows you what we call the face details page. The top half of it is, this is the face that was detected in the picture, and it has been matched with this person, Charles Moreau Harger. So in this case, I have 2 options. One is to edit details, which lets me change the spelling of the name. If I change the spelling of the name, it will change the spelling of the name for Charles Moreau Harger. That's not what I want to do in this case, because that label goes everywhere. In this case, what I want to do is I want to change person. That is not that person. So I say change person, choose new person, and I want to just look for, there we go. Sorry, Charlie. There he is. But somewhere in the 1970s, I think. And there we go. So now I have just changed this person. I should have checked with you, but sorry about that. And those are the key functions to get those face details right and know which way you put them. If when you're choosing a new person, you're like, yeah, oh, I don't really know who this is, you can just unmatch them at that point and the face is tossed back into the gallery. There is an article that also goes through that in a bit more detail. I think it's called naming people or something like that.
And Barbara, that works, I'm sorry to interrupt, that works on any photo, like even a newspaper. If I have a newspaper of, here's veterans from the 68th Ohio.
Right.
It'll go through and look at each of the veterans' photos and say, that looks like this photo from this.
It would go as the rule of thumb is it's trying to detect a face, you know, eyes, nose, mouth, for any face that is at least 50 pixels by 50 pixels in size. So the pixels are the, you know, the visual range that they appear in the photograph that you have uploaded. So this case, these pictures, by the way, are never selected because of the way we add them into your account. But you all, just not even knowing my brother, you could probably see that that's the same guy. And this picture is not, yeah, this is a pretty reasonable, I think it's like an 8 meg file, something like that, but not bigger than that. And yet that is more than enough to be able to detect that face. With newspaper pictures, it just really depends on, you know, if you have the original newspaper artifact and you can zoom in on it and get a close picture. And if, you know, old newspapers were done with a DPI, you know, with a dots to create the print. If that doesn't get in the way, and you can get a good enough scan, I mean, that might be a good one to experiment with to see how close you need to get.
Well, again, I'm thinking of combining my Ancestry newspaper link thing.
Yeah.
And seeing if I can come up with a photo of something in Ohio at that
There you go.
time.
There you go.
Cool.
You may find other groups of experts, you know, by those regiments or by those groups of other historians and families that have already started to collect those things. And, you know, I think, Anna, your point about crowdsourcing, you know, call in your lifelines and say, hey, here's what I'm building. What do you think? If you have, and in your case, you may basically be asking people you don't know for help. And a good way to do that is to describe your project and say, anybody that is interested in participating in this, send me your email and I will invite you to the picture. And then you're doing those invites. Frankly, that's sort of the way I invited you to the Harger family picture. By just, I have your email address and then I turn around and share it back out.
Yeah, and you'll recognize there's all kinds of resources as well. Pam, I think I mentioned in my chat with you that I'll send you 4 or 5 different resources that are on Civil War artifacts, and most all of those things that you would ever want are pretty reasonably digitized. And you will probably find that many of those images can be reused. And so that's kind of the same source of, you know, we want to get people into the idea that, you know, using the platform for crowdsourcing of information is a real critical and powerful element of what we do. And that crowdsourcing can come from other individuals. It can also come from any other resource element, whether it's a national archive, or it could be a museum, or it could be anybody that's curating information around which your project may or may not be based. We have one of our customers is doing a project on, I can't remember the actual number, but it's an infantry regiment that fought in Northern Europe during World War II. And they were nicknamed the Timberwolves. And it just so happens it's a legendary infantry unit. And so there's a tremendous amount of information out there. There's websites, there's museums and all of that stuff. And she's been able to aggregate a tremendous amount of information for storytelling around this whole organization that she's added into her activities. So
Yeah, that's a really fun one, especially because each of the families will have the legends, the internal family legends that are told. And, you know, maybe they're real, maybe they're not, maybe they don't know, but having a place to share, communally share those stories is really kind of delightful, because you'll have different families telling different versions of the same event. You know, Kathy, I wonder if I could ask a call on you to the comment that you just made into the chat about the suggestion of you assigning a number or code. I think I know where you're going with that. And I think it's a great suggestion for Pam and really any of us dealing with whole collections of photos of people we aren't sure who they are. You want to expand on that a little bit?
Well, what occurred to me is that my question, essence of my question was, could you, instead of when you don't know who anyone is, could you take a page and give everyone a number or a code of some kind, and then let the facial recognition um, run on another different page to at least pick up
Yes.
if you have the same people in
Yes.
any
So
of the pictures?
so let me put that together two different ways, because there's one part of that point is to say, if you don't know who this is, that's certainly okay. But by giving them, going through, giving the gallery a code for that name, it's kind of like knowing you're giving them the wrong name, because you know their name isn't page 3, number 2.
Right.
And then it will go through as you upload more pictures. The software doesn't care what the name is. So as you upload more pictures, it says, oh, look, there are 16 more instances of page 2, number 4. And now when you go out and you share the picture and people come back and say, wait a minute, his name isn't code page 2. That's my uncle. What was his name? And so on. Then you go in and you use the name changing thing to change the name, the face details to do the edit name, edit the name of the person. That's a great technique. And you know, Reed, we went through that with you, as a matter of fact, as we were sorting through a bug early on. And it's a very powerful way to handle, you know, I think that was his first wife. I don't remember what her name was. And then you can ask that way, because, you know, a lot of those wedding pictures will have all these people that you don't want to offend, but you don't know exactly who they are. That was his date, you know, that kind of thing.
Going back to newspapers, is there a good way to get copies of the newspaper clippings you have? I've tried scanning, I've tried putting paper, you know, white sheet behind them, and it still does not scan with a darn. So is there a way or something I can do to scan those articles?
Kathy, do you have any specific suggestions given your scanning background?
Have you tried black paper instead of white behind them? And are you scanning them as grayscale or in color? Color tends to work better. And a black piece of paper behind them. We use a weighted one, like almost like a photo mat. I actually ordered some photo mats the same size as my scanner bed, that has a little weight to it, because it tends most newspaper clippings haven't aged well, and they've got bends or creases in them, which also lifts them off the glass and causes issues with getting not a good scan. So it's got a bit of weight to it, but it's also the same size as the scanner. So you can actually leave the top off and just put something on it to hold it down.
Hey, Kathy.
Yeah.
Why don't you toss your email into the chat? So if people have some questions along those lines, they can get in touch with you directly, and you can kind of talk them through maybe some of the opportunities that, or techniques or strategies that you've learned over the years.
Great idea.
Okay, so using a black paper or black cardboard back. Now I've done it in color, so I should try it in gray.
Oh, color usually works best.
Okay.
Also, if I can suggest, if you know the issue and publication the original file was in, you might try looking for that publication date in the Library of Congress. And from within the Library of Congress, you would have the librarian's original scans They're usually in a PDF format, and you can zoom in at very high resolution and then do a screenshot, and poof, you have your picture.
Also, play with the resolution you're scanning at. If your scanner is capable of changing the resolution you're scanning at, try higher resolution, try lower, because it depends too, because some old newspaper clippings are usually yellow because they've yellowed. I don't know why. I just learned, because I've only owned one for years, the Epson V600, which is a flatbed scanner. It's an older model, but you can pick them up pretty cheap for on used, has a setting for newspapers, which I just learned a week and a half ago, because who goes through every single setting on their scanner? So I haven't tried that out yet, but sometimes just adjusting the resolution can help you get a better scan too.
Yeah. You know,
Okay.
this might be a good time to also point out that in our tips section, you may have seen the current featured article is one placed as a guest. The Victoria Press in Australia posted a guest post. We absolutely welcome posts from those of you who are professionals and have or just experimenting and have a great story to tell a larger story about what you're doing, or promote a story that you've already written on your own site or on related sites. Talk to us. We're delighted to host those kinds of things,
And
because
share processes that you have that are
yeah,
working. Anna mentioned in a comment in the chat that I saw that she writes out her process, what she's done. I think it was Anna, not sure, in the chat, who said she works on a batch and writes out the process she uses. That's a really, really good idea, because sometimes you do things in a certain way and it works really good, and other times you do it in a certain way and go, well, that didn't work that well. So
and what was it I did
share
before that worked so
processes that
well?
are working for you to do stuff in Ponga too.
We love that. We
I
love
love
that.
that too, because I got a lot to do. So I'd love it. So if you've got a process that works, there you go, Barbara. There's somebody else can write a guest post for you.
There you
I,
go.
I will get back when I've started uploading photos on my dad's side of the family, because there I can start linking to YouTube videos and interviews and stuff like that. So it
Awesome.
will. So the photo behind me is on my mum's side, and unluckily I only have the names of 3 of the people in the picture.
Mm.
I know that they are related because I can see it on the faces on some of them. But
Well, there's a great example of something that you've got, obviously a beautiful, beautiful photograph and scan to share to the extended family and ask.
and that is what I'm going to use Ponga for, because I have contact with other researchers on that part of the family.
Mm-hmm.
They might be able to recognize a few more faces.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, your case also reminded me of another, I think, somewhat unexpected benefit of the way we work with Ponga. Because Ponga runs in a browser, you get the added benefit of plugins and add-ins to your browser. So for example, a spell check, well, that's pretty obvious. If you use Grammarly, Grammarly is watching your writing as you're writing it in Ponga. But also, if you are sharing your pictures with relatives who are in another country and whose native language is a different language, they can use something like a Google Translate plugin to read copy in different languages. And it works in all scripts. It works in all languages. I don't think Klingon, but just about every language that Google has made public. I'm pretty sure they have a Klingon in the back room. And it can be a really fun way to bring generations together. Here in the United States, we have many immigrant families who have grandparents who are still back in that country of origin, and they don't get much contact with their great grandchildren and children. And it's really a great way to bring those families together, and sharing digital versions of these things is a lot easier than passing the originals back and forth across borders. Well, we are way past
Yes.
time
Yeah, I was gonna say we were.
again, and I know some people had to go. I totally understand. I am thrilled by your participation and encouragement. And look forward to the chance to continue these conversations. For next month, we've talked a little bit about making a slight change and doing these in an afternoon session. Just as a quick question, is that a problem for anybody, or is that better? Oh, coming in, Anna, I know you're in Europe.
Yeah,
It's either or
at
for you.
present, the time is 18 minutes past 7 in the evening in the UK.
Yeah, I realized that one. That's why we wanted to keep these in the morning. I've got somebody in Australia who wanted to join and bring some other people in Asia.
So it depends on how late in the afternoon it is.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Fair enough.
as we think about future topic areas, does anyone have any input about other types of information that you'd like to hear about? Would you like to hear testimonials from other people that are working on projects? Or is this kind of a forum and this kind of a agenda, is this something that's valuable to you, and would you want to continue this? Or are there some other things that you'd like to propose that we add in?
I would like to know, is it possible to do a layout or whatever and then present it as a slideshow or something at a funeral?
Oh, as a funeral. Let me just take a quick answer to that one. And the whole idea of the layout or photo books or story boards that we talked about earlier is the topic that I'm thinking about for next month.
Okay.
But to have something that might be self-running, for example, as you would for a funeral, um, Ponga by itself is not really your best tool for that. However, creating screen videos from the content in Ponga is actually remarkably easy to do today. There's a tool from Vimeo, Vimeo, that allows you to create screen videos that just takes the whole screen and just moves through it. I use it all the time. I think the baseline of screen recording is currently free on a Vimeo account, and can be a great way to do that. Once you have a video, you can take the video and I think there are tools to allow you to loop the playback of the video. And video is very often the most efficient way in terms of file size, more efficient oftentimes than a presentation tool that's just cycling through screenshots.
Okay. I do have one other question. All of my information and stuff for the Ponga is coming on my husband's computer because that's where we set it up. But I have my own computer. So is there a way to get emails to me as well as being able to work on my computer versus my
Great
husband's?
question. Great question. And Leanne, isn't it?
Yes.
I knew you weren't Robert. Your screen says Robert to me.
Yeah, because it's his computer.
I gotcha. Bob, in any case, yes, absolutely. In your case, what I would suggest is the membership account is in Bob's name. And
Yeah.
then what he can do is share all of the albums with you as his guest. So that would be your first share example from Bob to Leanne. When you accept the first one, or do one just to make sure you see how the mechanics work, you accept that, you create your account, you are now a guest of Bob. All of if he wants to share all of them over there, or whichever way you go, that will always work. You'll get notifications from me, and you will not see notifications for actually for pictures that are not shared with you. But if a picture that is shared with you that other people are making comments on, you will see all of those notifications.
Yeah, and once
So,
you're a guest, you'll register for, you'll register your email address for security purposes. But once you've done that, then you'll also be in our database so that we will be able to communicate with you about every time we add a tip or a trick, or we add new content to the blogs or any of that kind of stuff. You'll get a notification for that.
Okay.
in fact, I would really recommend that within a family, because whoever is posting a comment goes with the name of the account. So as you're posting comments using your husband's account, it looks like he made the comment. You're not getting credit for it, and your perspective isn't carried over. So it's really a good idea. You get your profile picture and the identity of the person. And if you have, 2 or 3 people in the family, that's perfectly fine. One is the member, the other are the guests. Of
So
course,
make
we're always
sure that,
happy to have more members, but yeah.
yeah, so make sure when Robert invites you, that when he does the invite, you may remember from a prior discussion we had that there's a toggle there that allows you to have view only or edit privileges. Make sure that he puts you in there as edit privileges so
Right.
that you have the opportunity of adding your own
Right.
content.
And that is the default.
Right.
Kathy.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, sorry, I had to run again. I hate working from home. My comment on your question about what we'd like to see, I found this very helpful. And these all the Zooms have been very helpful. It's helpful to listen to other people's questions. I would like to hear, as people are working through their accounts, the process they're using. That's very helpful to me for learning, because this is as photo organizers, we tend to be sticklers for dating and naming things, and not all of them are that exciting about the stories. I've always been hooked by the stories. So today, the revolution of possibly organizing by story that was a big aha for me today, of throwing that around as story instead of photo, because photo inherently, we're dating, we're organized normally by date, chronological order. But I kind of like that idea of the story. So I'd like to hear more about when people have used that. And again, hopefully I'll get to that point where I can start testing it out myself. But that would be very helpful, I think, to hear how other people are setting up their accounts.
Yeah, we have one of our members is an associate from long time for Barbara, who has founded an organization called the Bay Area Chinese Genealogy Group. And he is all about, it's actually a very cool set of stories, but it's all about celebrating and capturing the stories of Chinese Americans that were veterans that fought in World War II. And he's doing a set of projects where he's working on World War II first. He's going to move to the Korean War, then Vietnam, then Afghanistan, et cetera. And it's all about celebrating the role that Chinese veterans had in those American conflicts. And he is doing it from a story perspective, right? So he's telling the story and then organizing the artifacts around the story, right?
Yeah.
It's a good example of one. Yeah.
Another one is you'll see in the article and tips about the storyboards. She came at this as a writer. She's moved from being a genealogist to say, just chucking it all over and saying, no, really, it's about the story. So she's been exploring that story-centric view. And I think what's really important about the distinction is, on one hand, you're very focused on the facts and the accuracy of the facts, because if they're not accurate, you're just fooling around. You have no foundation. So, and you have so many related facts. So on the other hand, you're playing in the world of storytelling, where you have opinion and color and legend and so on, which have value. It's really important to keep clear the difference. And I think that's a core guide that is really important to keep in mind and know what you're doing, know which is which, and when it matters. So, for example, I think there's another whole use case for Ponga of essentially telling children's stories, lining up teddy bears, taking pictures, and then telling a story that goes with it. It has absolutely nothing to do with fact. What the fact in all of that is just the love of the parent and the charm and that connection and blah, blah, blah. Is that valid? Absolutely. Is it genealogy? Not a chance. Except for the importance of those artifacts, or maybe the provenance of those artifacts, and what that related to, items that were passed down or whatever else. It's just about keeping your facts straight, which is something that's so critically important in the work that genealogists do, why that evidence is so critical to have that documentation and so on and so forth. Do not mix the two up.
Yeah, the use cases, and that's a good prompt, Kathy, because I think the use cases, as we're discovering, are unbelievably broad. They're almost as unique as all of our members that have joined and are using the product. And I think next month we're going to have Victoria from Australia on, is our plan, to talk exactly about how she's thinking about this storyboarding process.
Right.
And so I would encourage everybody to look in their emails for the invite to the next event, and that way you can kind of see a best practice that she's developed.
And her post in the current in the tips right now. You know, in her case, she has this history that goes back, I believe it's to Scotland, and an inn that was in her family, and she's gone back, and she has these artifacts that tell the story of the people who were there, and where the ownership passed for this pub in Scotland, and then the stories about what was going on in the pub in Scotland, and they're hysterical. But you know, that's the difference, the combination of facts and storytelling. Well, again, this has been wonderful.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you so much. It's a delight always to see you and meet new friends. And I would encourage you, if you have any questions that we didn't cover, or you want just a little explanation, you're more than welcome to reach out, and we'll help you in any way we can.
In the meantime, all of you are really early users with us, as you know, and we appreciate your commitment and your support. And you can help us out. Please mention us to your friends, put us on Facebook, put us on your social media accounts. We will be coming out with a new product that you'll be able to get to on our website, which is the ability to purchase gift cards if you wanted to give out subscriptions or memberships to friends, family, whatever, so they can participate as well. So just watch for these announcements as they're coming down the pike, and you'll be getting emails from us on future events on a regular basis.